Dream Journal. From the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, the Dream Journal is a weekly show where we explore the healing powers of nighttime dreams through conversations with dream experts and with you. Of Carl Jung, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. Today's music is Pastoralize. Does dream sharing increase empathy and insight? Join my conversation with two English professors who say, yes, it does. The Science and Art of Dreaming is their new book. I am your host, Catherine Bell, of Experiential Dreamwork, and welcome to the Dream Journal. The Dream Journal is also a weekly podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review. But most importantly, tell your friends. This is my main mission of the show, is to get people talking about dreams. So why not take the podcast as an opportunity to tell your friends about your dreams? If you're looking for archives, you can find them on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and now available on Amazon Music as well. You can find full archives, too, also at ksqd.org/the-dream-journal. Okay. So, I have been sick all week. Still sick, even after from last week. Listeners will remember. But that's okay. COVID's still out there, and we can get through it. So, I had a dream where I was driving in a car. Not sure who was driving, but Max and I were in a car, and we're passing past this really familiar dream landscape. And I think, oh, there's that mountain peak. Maybe we should go up there. But I don't say that. Instead, what I say is, let's go check out that meadow down below where those elks graze. And there's something so beautiful and peaceful about going down to the meadow that I get to choose to not climb the peaks. Maybe I get to choose to go to the peaceful place. Why not? So that's my dream moment to share. So we have two guests today. Let me first say hello to Mark Blagrove. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Catherine. Hi.
Hi, so glad to have you on the show.
Yes, good to be here.
And then we also have Julia Lockheart. Hello, Julia.
Hello.
Okay. Fabulous. All the way from London, yet you sound like you're right inside my head. I love this technology. Okay, so let me introduce our guests. Mark Blagrove is Professor of Psychology and Director of the Sleep Laboratory at Swansea University, UK. He is a past president of the International Association for the Study of Dreams. And Julia Lockheart is Associate Professor at the Swansea College of Art, University of Wales, Trinity St. David, and is a Fellow of the Royal Society for Arts. Since 2016, they have undertaken public Omen dream discussions, with Julia simultaneously painting each dream as part of their Dreams ID collaboration, which has resulted in their 2023 book, The Science and Art of Dreaming. You can find our guest at dreamsid.com. So before we get into this whole thing of painting dreams, which I love, I think it's wonderful, I'd like to start by finding out how you each got interested in dreaming. But maybe let's start with Julia. Tell us a little bit about what first got you interested in dreaming.
Well, I had very vivid dreams from very young, very visual, highly colorful, very strange, and I would try to tell them to people. And my own amazement at the dreams, I think, possibly gave me a kind of reputation as somebody who was always talking about dreams. And then later on, I would make paintings about my dreams, which was very interesting. But then what did interest me most was I went on to do a written MA after doing a BA and an MA in fine art. I went into looking at language, and my dreams sort of dried up. So I thought that was really interesting. What's the relationship between language learning of language and writing of essays, and possibly how you're more encouraged to dream and to find colours and patterns in your dream when you're making art. So that really drew me in.
Oh, that is very interesting association. I'm curious to hear that. I have not heard people say things like that before. Thank you, Julia.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mark, what about you? How did you first get interested in dreaming?
I read a book called The Innocence of Dreams by a psychoanalyst called Charles Rycroft, which was released, I think, in 1982. And that said that people dream innocently. In other words, they make these dreams that depict their life. So they're not saying anything that's completely meaningless. They are metaphorical depictions of our lives, and they're not trying to hide anything in the Freudian sense. They're depicting our lives. So I got into dreams. I did a PhD on the relationship between dreaming and waking life. Then I did lots of research on sleep and memory in the sleep lab for many, many years, which I still do. And then I was interested in dreaming at the same time as a scientific study. And then I started, because of International Association for the Study of Dreams, getting interested in dream discussions. So I did work on the dream discussions and quantitative work on what benefits people get personally from dream discussions. So I got more and more into the dream discussions, and then when I was going to do them even more publicly, teamed up with Julia to do so.
I'm really struck by this concept of the innocence of dreams, and that they are just being their authentic self with us in a way, but so often we can't even understand them. That's such a kind of a contradiction, maybe.
Yes, I certainly found in the dream. Oh, sorry. Yes, I certainly found on the dream groups and being a member of dream groups, but also running dream groups, that it very much helps to have other people making suggestions for how the dream is related to the person's waking life. So that sort of overcomes some of the inability to spot what might be there in the dream.
So they kind of fall into our blind spots or something. Even though they're telling the truth, there's something we don't recognize about the truth.
Yes, so it helps to do it with other people.
Julia, what do you have about this? I heard you jumping in.
Well, it was just that they are artworks that we're creating in our sleep. And they're very filmic often. And if we can lucidly dream, we can have some control over them. But otherwise, they are being created by us, and usually we're in them. So we're the kind of star in our dream often, and they're built around our experiences. So that makes them very individual, and they carry a lot of our waking life experiences in them.
Yes. There are something very artistic about dreaming, not just the visuals, but even the plot line seems often very poetic.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me find out a little bit about the Ullman method of dream sharing. Maybe Mark, would you like to say a little bit about what that is and how that works in a group, and then how you first thought about including Julia as an artist and how you started to bring art into these groups?
Yes, Montague Ullman was a psychoanalyst and psychiatrist, and he invented this method so that lay people can appreciate their own dreams in a group. And it has several stages. It's all written up in his paperback book called Appreciating Dreams. And the person tells the dream in as much detail as possible. And then that's the main first stage, and that's kept very separate from a later stage in which people talk about their waking life and what's been on their mind, whether it's related to the dream or not. And then what happens is the group tries to tie together what the person has said about their waking life from what they said about their dream. And the very important thing about the process is the stages, and there are other stages to it as well, are kept very separate, so that as much information about the dream is collected. So, for example, if you recall a dream in the night, the idea is don't go starting to analyze it. Get the dream in as much detail as possible, and then later on talk about your life in as much detail as possible. irrespective of the dream, and then try and match them together. And so his book is very, very readable on that. So I was doing public discussions on that. And then, as you know, I said to Julia that I was going to do some public discussions for a science festival. And that's when Julia had an idea about what she could do with it.
Yeah, Julia, maybe jump in and say a little bit about how that idea came to you and what you were thinking about that.
Well, sometimes these things come out of a little bit of grumpiness, and I am often a bit grumpy that science is given more support to engage with the public than the arts are given, particularly in the UK. So I was a bit grumpy about, another thing you've been asked to do. So I then suggested, well, okay, let's try and bring together the idea of dreaming and public engagement, and what about I make a live drawing of what's happening. And initially there were live drawings, and then I mean, there's a lot of examples of, for example, block poetry, or this kind of work where you work on top of other people's texts. The main artist that I was aware of was a British artist called Tom Phillips, who sadly died I think at the end of last year or at the beginning of this year, so it's very, very recent. And he created a book called The Humulent, A Humulent, and the humulent was a combination of two other words that he put together after finding a book and creating a character who he tells sort of stories about throughout the book by locating the character in the book. So I was aware of this in the history of art and how artists paint on top of books, they paint on top of words. And I saw an opportunity to use Freud's book, The Interpretation of Dreams, as a palimpsest, as a surface onto which I could create and return the dream to a visual form. But what happened initially was we did this in 20 minutes, so they were very sketchy, but we were both amazed by certain coincidences that were happening as I chose the pages, which were done very quickly, as you can imagine, in 20 minutes. I was tearing them out based on the structures and the shape of the paragraphs. And for example, at the bottom of the page, there might be some italic notes at the bottom and things like that. And I was using those elements to create an image. And then I was deep diving into the work and finding words from Freud that related to the current dream. So you've got these words from 1900 from Freud's book that are coming up and are circled and are there as key components of the person's dream. And we just thought at first, this would be an interesting kind of transitional object that these dreamers could take away with them as a, thank you. It was a dream exchange, thank you for sharing your dream with us. In exchange, we're giving you this piece of art that they took away with them, torn from the book. And we gradually realized that, there was something really important here, and we were observing our own reactions to it. And this was when we began to notice things to do with empathy and things to do with returning the dream to a visual form, and also the use of found poetry, which comes also from the surrealists. So there was a kind of art historical trajectory going on in the work as well.
That's really interesting. I mean, I whenever I can, I've gone through various phases of painting my own dreams, and I find it's always very helpful. And it's also helpful when other people share with me their ideas about dreams. But so you're taking someone's dream and creating art around it, and providing them that kind of insight. And do you also take some of the ideas that other people in the room are bringing out about the dream, or do you stay really strictly with the dream?
No, it's completely about the discussion. So the dream is told. We have manipulated or changed the Ullman technique a little bit. So the dreamer tells the dream 3 times. With Ullman, I think it's just once in a lot of detail, but we ask for the dreamer to repeat it 3 times. So there's this immediate slow down of how you're telling this dream, and hearing yourself in a way telling the dream. And so the whole process lasts about 90 minutes. And within that time, in the tradition of an artistic happening, I will create the work, and at the end of it, I do not go back to the work. So there's a kind of a framing of the work within a particular time, chosen time slot. And as the discussion develops around the Ullman technique, so there are 5 stages, and they kind of wind. For me, being very visual, I see them like a kind of a spiral where you're winding around the dream, and eventually you get to the real nub of the dream. And at that point, I'm pulling in all of the discussion that's happening around me. And I go, as much as the surrealists used to do this, into a kind of a sort of poetic trance almost. I'm kind of lost in the visual side of it. I'm doing lots of things. I'm working with the language of Freud. I'm working with the discussion that's going on. I'm also creating an image. I'm working with the structures within the paragraphs. There's a lot going on in my head, and I don't speak because that just overloads me.
Right. Wow. So you really get to contribute an incredibly from the unconscious, the way that artists do so often. Yeah.
Well, you're drawing. You're drawing on your skills and abilities, which have taken,
of course, yes,
many years to develop. But you're kind of reaching a point where you're in a level of flow. You're in a flow state, I should say. Probably that's more better as an illustration than the idea of a trance, because I'm not completely out of it, but I am in a flow state where it's just flowing, and that goes after the 90 minutes, and then I present the artwork. And Mark and I, did sort of have discussions about language quite a lot at the beginning, because interpretation within psychology has a very specific meaning. And I like to say, well, the piece of work that I create at the end is my interpretation of all of these elements coming together. This is my interpretation. But it's very interesting that different disciplines own language or words, and keywords in particular, in very specific ways. And there is a kind of gatekeeping when you work in a collaborative project like we do, that we've had to take on board each other's understandings of our disciplines.
Right. Oh, that's wonderful. And you will actually be doing this process, the two of you will bring this process to the IASD in Ashland this June. Isn't that right? You're doing a workshop that is version of this.
Yes, that's right. We've done it at several IASD conferences, and they've gone down so well, because it's a multi-sensory experience for everybody who's there. Not only are they engaging with the dreamer, talking about the dream, listening, they're also seeing Julia's artwork, which is projected onto a massive screen behind the dreamer. And so it's very multi-sensory. And so they see this painting develop. And then at the end, the dreamer turns around and sees it, and the dreamer is shown the actual artwork on the pieces of paper, which incidentally, the publisher of Freud's interpretation of dreams allows Julia to tear out pages to make the artworks. And then we scan that and then make an enlarged print. And that later on is presented to the dreamer as an artwork. But yes, we're doing it at IASD, and it always goes down very, very well there.
Oh, wonderful. Maybe I'll be able to drop in on you this time around. So tell me about empathy, Mark. Certainly I know that the groups that I'm a part of, we develop a lot of very deep relationships, just this real sense of connection. And yet you have, you're a scientist, and the sleep lab and everything. So what kind of evidence do you have that dream sharing builds empathy? Say a little more about that.
Yes. Well, first of all, this was a bit of a surprise to us, because we saw it almost, what we were doing, Julia and I were doing more as a public service in a way. We would give an artwork to this person, we would give a discussion to them, and they would explore their dream and get insights from it. But we slowly started realizing that these discussions were having effects on us, and particularly with some people who we wouldn't normally have met in waking in real life. Possibly with experiences that we wouldn't have had. And we were really feeling for them. And our book gives examples of those, of dreams that were unbelievably poignant. And so when we realized, we're starting to feel some empathy towards these people, I looked in the literature and there was nothing on dream sharing and empathy. There were studies on dream sharing in relationships and why people share dreams and possibly they become closer, but there was no actual study on dream sharing and empathy. So I got hold of an empathy scale, which measures how much a person feels empathy-wise towards another person. And we got pairs of people. I think we got about 15 pairs in the first study of people, and they filled that out for each other, about each other. So how much empathy does one person feel towards the other person? You know, how much do they appreciate their life circumstances? How much do they understand their emotions? How much do they feel for them and understand what they're going through in their life? So they filled that out. That gives us a baseline. And they then shared a dream with each other. Only one of them would tell a dream. So they would tell one dream. They would possibly tell up to 4 dreams across a period of a few weeks. And then after each time when they shared a dream, they would each complete that questionnaire again. And what we found was that the dream sharer did not have a change in their empathy towards the other person, because, you know, the dream sharer isn't really learning much more about the other person. And the discussion is all about the dream sharer's dream and life. But the person who was having the discussion with them had a significantly increased level of empathy towards the dream sharer. And so this was the first time this was ever studied in an experiment. We also found that there's a trait for empathy, you know, your level of empathy in general. So it has questions on it like, you know, if somebody is humiliated in front of you, do you feel sorry for them? And obviously an empathic person would say, yes, I do. So it was that type of question on the empathy questionnaire. If you see someone crying, do you attempt to make them feel better? And what we found was that people who are higher on trait empathy are also higher on sharing dreams. So we put all that into a big paper in a journal called Frontiers in Psychology, which is a very major science journal, and it's got enormous publicity and citations of it. But it was the first time that it was shown that dream sharing can increase empathy towards the person sharing the dream.
Well, that's something that certainly we could use a lot more of in our society.
Yes. Yes.
But there's also an interesting little piece there about the people who already are high in empathy are ones who are attracted to Dreamwork.
Yes, that's right. They may want to listen to other people's dreams, or they may tell their own dreams. And indeed, they even had a higher appreciation of dreams as well. There's a personality scale called positive attitude to dreaming. You know, it's whether or not you think dreams might be important versus you think dreams are just nonsense and should be ignored, and the people who share them should be ignored as well. So we were finding there that people with a higher level of empathy and connectedness with other people were higher on their positive attitude to dreaming, as well as the frequency with which they shared and listened to other people's dreams.
Well, I'm getting a little flash of one of the reasons why I enjoy this IASD conferences so much, because people there, if they're attracted to Dreamwork, are probably already high in empathy. So we just have a lot in common, I guess.
Yes, that's true. And the other thing about the ISD conferences is, of course, that it's completely multidisciplinary. So there are the scientists, there are the therapists, there are people who are just interested in dreams for personal reasons, anthropologists, everything. So if
artists,
it hadn't been for artists, clinicians, therapists, if it hadn't been for going to those conferences, then the collaboration between Julia and me wouldn't even started, because there wouldn't have even been that level of knowing that such collaboration is possible.
Okay, thank you. So this is Mark Blagrove and Julia Lockhart. My name is Catherine Bell, and you are listening to The Dream Journal. We are broadcast live from the KSQD studios in Santa Cruz and co-broadcast live in San Jose at KCXU, and of course on the podcast everywhere starting on Monday. And we will be right back. I have some topics to talk about, including Freud's famous patient, Dora, and we're going to get into a little bit about the theories and function of dreams, and of course we'll be opening up the phones. So we'll be right back. Next week, I'd like to let you know that on Saturday is April Fool's Day, and we will have on our show one of dreaming's biggest tricksters of all, Robert Moss. Robert has written 17 books, including nonfiction, fiction, and poetry. Other upcoming guests include Webdelic's podcast host Scott Mason, Ancestral Dreamer Alaya Danu, Radio 8-Ball Show host Andras Jones, and my writing coach Andy Couturier. Also, I start another round of interactive Zoom dream groups on Monday. It's a 5-week series about finding and connecting with dream allies. Email me for details or go to experientialdreamwork.com/workshops. So this is the Dream Journal, and we have live with us from England, Mark Blagrove and Julia Lockhart. And I hear that we now have a phone call. Welcome to John from Santa Cruz. Hello, John.
Hello.
Hey.
I have a question about the physical component of my dreams. Multiple times a month, I can be in a dream, and like I've fallen back into a rose bush, and I actually feel the thorns pierce my skin. And then also taking that a little bit different route, if I'm with somebody, I can touch their skin, and I can feel the warmth and the suppleness of the skin. What is that all about?
What do you think? Mark, what do you have to say about that? Any ideas?
Yes, that's very interesting, John. That's actually quite fortunate that you're able to do that, because most dreams are simply visual and hearing. There may be a little bit of, pressure on the feet, possibly if you're walking around, but most of them are visual and hearing. Smell is very, very rare, and so is touch is very, very rare. But we can do both of them. They're just rare, and you are in a way a fortunate person to be able to have that as a component of the dream as well.
It's really fortunate to be able to do that. It's fun.
Yes.
I wonder if in waking life, if you're a little bit more sensate in that way than other people are. Have you noticed that by any chance, John?
Maybe so. Maybe so.
Okay.
And then there's one thing, relative to the physical that I can perceive. Like I said, if I've fallen back into like a rose bush and I felt the thorns, but if I get in a physical altercation in my dream, like a fight, I never feel a blow to my body. It's just those subtle things on the skin sensation and that. So it's good to be a human and be able to experience that.
Yes, that's right. Yes, there's a thing for people who are called highly sensitive persons, which is a personality trait, and one of the things in there is a feeling of either discomfort or interest on textures. That they're much more concerned for the textures of things. So possibly you've got that in your dreams because of a higher level of sensitivity to stimuli, but also the imagined stimuli you have when you're asleep in dreaming.
Interesting. Maybe it's just as well to not feel the body blows.
Yeah. One last thing on the emotional component of dreams. I was in graduate school, and I had to study all the time. And in my dream, I would be in a 3-story Victorian building, and I could climb out on the roof on the top stories, and I could see all my friends down below playing and having a good time. But I knew I couldn't go down there because I had to study.
Oh, wow. Even dreaming about being conscientious. That's quite something. Yes.
Yes. All right.
And was that a recurrent dream?
Yes. Until I left school, and I haven't had it since. So that's been almost 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, well, lucky you. Many of us still dream about our school years. Maybe you're done with yours.
All right. Well, thanks. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, John.
Thanks
I
for
appreciate
sharing.
that. Yes, absolutely. And we have another person on the lines. This is Stephen Pop from The Garden Show, who is the show that immediately precedes ours. He has a dream that he would like to share.
Indeed. Good morning, Catherine.
Good morning,
Mark,
Stephen.
Julia. Good morning. Yeah,
Morning.
I'm in the studio with Rick right now. So the dream that I had earlier this week, ever since talking to Catherine about dreams, I've been recording my dreams and paying more attention to them than I normally do. But this particular dream stood out on its own. In this dream, I went to visit a good friend of mine who's a fellow horticulturalist and plant collector. He, unlike me, does not keep any animals of any sort, but in the dream, I go to visit him, and he says, Steve, and we're always surprising each other with new plants and things, but he says, Steve, I've got to show you this. Tell me what you think of this. And he opens the door to a bedroom, and there in the middle of the floor is the biggest black snake I have ever seen in my life. And it is hooded. It is a black cobra, but unlike a normal snake that would be coiled up in a circle, this is in a square. It's geometrically squared with its coils, and it rears its head up. And now I'm not particularly frightened of snakes. I grew up with snakes. I have had many a close encounter with rattlesnakes and such in the Sierras and in Northern California, and I don't dislike them or have any phobias around them, but cobras are kind of a different thing. And this thing starts to come towards me, and I'm like closing the door saying, Rick, what is this? What is this about? And the snake manages to go underneath the crack of the door, and I'm backing up thinking, oh my God, what is this? Well, the snake comes right up to me. It doesn't bite me. It starts to climb up on my body, on my shoulder, and I notice that unlike a normal scaly snake, this thing's velvety. It's very, very tactile for me. It's velvety. And it proceeds to go up onto my shoulders and just nuzzle my ear with its mouth. Now, it's interesting, and the dream ended at that point or moved on, but it's interesting to me hearing you talk about drawing or artwork from dreams, because I was so taken aback by this squaring of its coils that I started trying to, I'm not a great artist, but I started to try to do a rudimentary rendering of this thing, and it wasn't coming out right. Well, I had kept putting the snake's head on the outside of the square, and it wasn't until I drew it with it on the inside of the square that it made sense to me. But of course, it doesn't make sense to me. None of it makes sense to me. It's just that's why I'm sharing it with you.
Yeah, interesting. But something resolved when you change the position of the head.
Yes. Yeah.
I wonder, Julie, do you have anything to say about this? Like when you're working with artists, drawing dreams? Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought how much like an unorganic object this is. So you've got the idea of plants, you've got a friend who's a horticulturalist, and yet this object that you're looking at, this strange snake, is coiled almost like something digital. It has a kind of digital sense to me, and the blackness of it is almost like the empty screen of an iPhone or of a one of those phones, which is kind of very square as well, or a computer screen. That blackness, but then when it changes to velvety, and then you can feel this velvety. There's a move towards it it's nuzzling you, it's climbing onto you, and it's nuzzling you, and it's far more of an organic object. I mean, the velvet, there's a lot of leaves that have that kind of velvety sense to touch, aren't there?
Yes.
I can think of some here in England that are called rabbit's ears.
Oh, sure.
And you touch them and they're kind of a minty green color, and you touch them and they are like velvet. So I'm wondering if there's a transition, because I don't know very much about you, but because you work in a radio station, I wonder if there's something about the online, the digital world that is transforming into this velvety, sensual world when you go to your garden. So that there's two worlds that you're experiencing. But that's my immediate I don't know if any of that means anything to you, or...
Well, it's interesting in that I've probably always been a technophobe for most of my life. I've overcome that in recent years, and things like phones and computers are just tools to be used any more than a hoe or a spade or something. But it definitely had a very non-organic shape to it to begin with. But then I'm used to snakes being very not velvety or tomentose or having any kind of fur, and this was very smooth, very soft, and the minute it touched my body and started to climb me, I was sort of just giving in and saying, well, if it hasn't bit and killed me now, it's not going to. And I was completely relaxed at that point. And like I said, I've handled snakes, and and I have a lot of respect for the poisonous ones. I mean, the ones that bite you are the ones that you try to pick up. But
this one was coming up on you.
It was coming up on me. I wasn't trying to pick it up. No, I was trying to get the hell away.
And they're very sort of muscular, aren't they? And they are very defined in their the sort of barriers of them to the earth or the ground that they go on. They're very defined, aren't they? And it also makes me think of the Greek symbol, the
caduceus.
Asclepius.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah. I the after image in my mind when I was thinking about the dream was of the Naga spirits of the land. I am a Buddhist, but I don't know how much that plays into it. But yeah, it definitely had weight. It wasn't just like a plush toy.
Yeah.
What an interesting dream.
It is. It's a fabulous dream. For me, one of the things that I would treasure about the dream is the feelings, like the sensations, like starting with the kind of sense of surprise of seeing it in a square, but then as it touches you, you described relaxing and totally changing the way you felt. And so I would explore those feelings, those literal sensations, and just to see there's something there, there's some value there in having that feeling. Since the dream is an evolutionary derived product, it has some value. We don't need to understand what the value is for it to be valuable.
Yes,
Thank you for bringing this
you can, Steve. Just have it in the sense of this was an experience of an animal like this that most people would have thought was frightening, but no, it's after the square, it becomes just on you in an almost friendly, unthreatening way. But as Catherine has just said, you could leave it at that, or you could try to explore whether it makes you think about anything in your waking life. The organic side of yourself and your work, or the technical side, or animal side.
Well, I've certainly been thinking along those lines, and the animal side particularly, because I do have animals and live with a lot of them. But it's definitely. I actually treasure the dream. I'm actually very happy to have had it. It's not troubling for me, just confusing with that whole inorganic squaring geometric thing.
Right. Well, there's something innocence, going back to the beginning of Mark's comment about the innocence of dreams. There's something that very beautiful about this. It just is. It is what it is, and I love how you're honoring the dream, Steve, by drawing it, taking time to really feel into how it wants to be drawn, and then talking to us about it. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, take care, Steve. Hopefully I'll be in the studio and get to see you next week.
Enjoy your pajama time.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Excellent. Okay. So wonderful. Interesting how both of those dreams had to do with physical sensations, which, as you so rightly mentioned, Mark, is pretty rare in dreaming to have.
It's pretty rare, yes.
And yet both of those dreams had physical sensations.
Yes, that really does make the dream a sort of an environment to be like that. It's not just a hallucination; it's an environment that you're in, and you can actually feel it. That's a very important part of dreaming, and how dreams are seen from an artistic point of view, but also from a scientific point of view as an environment you're really you're really within.
I like to think of that way of thinking about the environment, that the dream just puts us in a particular environment, and there's something beneficial about that environment. Otherwise, why bother?
Yes.
And we don't know why. So we probably have time for about one more topic. We have a couple different ones on the table, and I wonder, do you two have a priority topic? There'll be time at the end for contact information and announcements about the book and things like that. So we have, what are you most interested in bringing up at this point?
That's very difficult because there's three big
Yes, I know.
There's three big things in the book about the link with surrealism and surrealist films.
Okay.
And then there's a whole thing about human self-domestication, which is the idea that humans have domesticated each other like we've done with cats, dogs, and horses.
Absolutely.
And so the calmer humans are sort of preferred for mating with a lot of the time, and humans have become domesticated, and maybe dream sharing has been a part of that. But in our book, Science and Art of Dreams, we've also got a whole chapter on Freud's famous patient Dora, who the Dora case, because she was so young and being sexually harassed by somebody, is usually taken as a criticism of Freud, but it's he recorded her dreams, and her dreams are beautiful depictions of her troubled life, and Julia then made 2 paintings of them. So whichever of those Catherine or Julia wants, we're happy with.
Well, I have to say that I think you were about to. All 3 of those are about to be trumped because we have another caller.
All right. Great.
You never know what's going to happen. So on these shows, I love it. So we have Ray from Santa Cruz on line 1, and I want to say hello to Ray.
Hello, Catherine, and all your fine, fabulous guests.
Hi, Ray.
I didn't want to get in the middle of the conversation. I just had another dream that, has to do with the animal realm, and I was attending almost like a maypole ritual or something. There were a number of people out at some kind of a celebration. I got like this feeling of being at Stonehenge or something. I didn't really see that. And there's this like giant grizzly bear who's part of the mix. Which just reminded me of something, a couple of bear dances I went to way back in the day, but this was not one of them either. Maybe it had some kind of previous correlation in my mind going back there. But anyway, what happened in the dream was there was this big bear, and he wasn't like being part of the celebration like they would have been at a bear dance. This one was just like kind of standing there looking at everybody, but they were, all good with this bear standing there watching him. Oh, that was cool. But then I'm maybe 50 feet away or so as I watch this, and I see, and the bear all of a sudden looks at me, and I get kind of afraid, thinking, oh my God, this bear, has it in for me. So I kind of get farther away from this crowd of people and see this cabin that I'm going to go in and protect myself from this bear. And the second I get in the cabin and I try to lock this door, it has just a little flimsy, like a hook and eye lock on the inside of it. And the first thing I think is, well, that's not going to keep a bear out. But then, sure enough, as soon as I get in the cabin, this bear breaks the door down. And then I scurry up into this little loft that's at the back of this cabin, and the bear comes in, and he's tall enough to where he could basically, reach this cabin, this loft that's about 8 feet above the floor. He can reach this loft, and I have this feeling that he could just grab me and do whatever he wants with me, but he just kind of stops right there and looks at me, and that's where the dream ends.
Oh.
So I don't have any insights about any of that.
Well, there's a parallel there with Steve's dream of something that could be dangerous, but it isn't, because it's chasing me in the dream, but I don't actually get caught.
Right. Which happens in my dreams all the time, actually. I never get caught, thank God. But anyway.
Julia, yeah.
Yes, I was just going to say that there is this connection with nature in both of the dreams, where as you're saying, it's not as frightening as possibly it could be. And maybe that's something to do with our human condition, that we have this world that we've created that is so separate from nature. You know, we live in these houses which are no longer necessarily made from the environment, that, you know, the wood, not necessarily chopping down the wood from the area, and don't necessarily fit in with the area. So we have this distance from our native sort of natural environment. And maybe the grizzly bear in that way is a part of that fear of this, but actually it isn't frightening. It's just there, and it just wants to be near you and to watch you, to look at you. Very interesting, I think. What colour is the bear? Is he a black bear? I mean, is grizzly brown?
Well, the bear is actually, its fur is black for sure. And, you know, the bears I've seen, well, I've never actually been up right close to one, but, I've seen lots of photos of them and stuff, and they range from really black to reddish, really light brown. And this one was a very, almost pure black, dark bear for sure.
And see, there's something quite menacing about black, as similar to the
black was in the last gentleman's name, too, the black snake too.
It has this sort of, again, has this connotation of a negative space, almost, of something we can't quite get an understanding of, because
it's very
visually
much like a bit of the subconscious, something that we're not really conscious of. Well, Ray, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up at this moment, and I'll like give you a similar idea that I gave to Steve, which is perhaps it's the feeling of this being the bear chasing me, that there's something about this that's familiar from waking life, or it's something that's coming from inside of me. There's something about this, and even what Mark was saying, the dream as an environment. So I just invite you to explore the sensations.
Well, I like that what she just said about our environment and our houses not really necessarily being built from natural materials anymore, because I'm a builder too, so I think about that kind of thing a lot. So maybe you picked up on that too. Hey, well, thank you so much for all being there. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks a lot, Ray.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now. So what is the best way to get in touch with you? You have your webpage, dreamsid.com, and I'll just say this is Mark Blagrove and Julia Lockheart from England again. So dreamsid.com. Is there any other place for people to get in touch with you, or what else would you like to share with our listeners?
Well, lots of Julia's artworks are on there, and science papers and articles in art journals about what we've been doing. If people wanted to order the book, they could ask the kind folks at Bookshop Santa Cruz to order the Science and Art of Dreaming, and it's been riding high on Amazon. Although we'd prefer people to go to Bookshop Santa Cruz for
good.
buying
Appreciate
it if they could. So, but we are on dreamsid.com, and we're on Twitter, dreamsid, and we're on Instagram, dreamsid_artworks.
Okay, thank you so much. It's so good to have you guys on the show. I will see you in Ashland in June.
Yes, look forward to it, Catherine. Thank you very much for inviting us. Yeah.
Yep, and thank you, KSQD.
All right, thanks. Okay, and thank you, listeners. So glad that you tuned in. The Dream Journal is produced at the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, California. I am Catherine Bell. Find out about my dream coaching practice at experientialdreamwork.com. You can email me at catherine@ksqd.org. That's KATHERINE@ksqd.org. You can follow Experiential Dreamwork on Facebook and Instagram to find out about upcoming shows. I'd like to thank Rick Kleffel, engineer and music creator. You can find the ambient music at pandemiad.com. I'd like to thank Tony Rissimano for the phones, Eva Milady for audio editing. Intro music is Water Over Stones. This outro music is called Everything, both by Mood Science. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, take a minute to write down your dream and bring it to the next Dream Journal.
what much more is right.